in the way its procedures are. For the American Constitution, if over 50% of the people voted on a single issue about changing the Constitution, then I would take that very seriously. If it was Congress that had asked the referendum on the constitutional change with a view to saying, if you do it, we'll look to try and implement it, if it looks feasible, then I'd say, yeah, that's quite democratic. Of course, there are constitutional moments which seem a bit special and hard to define in legal terms, and that's when a constitution is starting, which would be the case for America's Declaration of Independence, but also for Germany and for the French republics when they began. That's a very common situation, but it doesn't, by saying a treaty-based organization has some failures if it doesn't accept any democratic input, it doesn't mean that other constitutions of the world have any problems. And in fact, when you look at America, you say tough voting, varied views, ability to change its constitution with enough support. These are all signs of a democracy. Sounds good. Sounds like I'd like to be involved. And with the second point of would a simple, more simpler organization be better, I'd like you to think about a comparison between the European Union and the World Trade Organization. Now, both treaty-based organizations. Now, the simplicity of the WTO is quite powerful and effective. They have a single view, which is that free trade is good, and we should lower boundaries to trade in a mutually beneficial manner if there aren't likely to be very significant costs. But we'll do it with the consent of the people involved in the treaty, and if there isn't consensus, then we won't go too far. Now that's good because it's simple. But what that is not good for is being able to debate issues of free trade. So if you feel you suffer because of principles of free trade, you cannot join that organization and convince everyone to change their minds and create trade barriers. They would say, why are you joining in the first place? And so similar to that, even if you make the EU simple, if it doesn't have a space for democratic debate and it engages in prescriptive policies about the member states for which they have no say and have no idea which topic is going to be taken up next by the Commission in its latest directives, then of course you'd say, good, if I am finished with the topic. If I think European integration, however defined by the Commission, is the right thing, keep it simple and I'll buy into it. Because I value democracy, I believe it to be an essential part of European culture, I can't buy into a wholesale organization which doesn't question its own internal reform.
Thank you, Dominic. I want to make a question also to Daniel related to your question, which is that we're saying that there is a lack of transparency and a lack of democracy in the European institutions, and that we don't have means to correct that. And whereas you're advocating for reform. My doubt in all these is that perhaps we don't have the basis, the population basis. I mean, every democracy needs a demos. In order to have a democracy, you need a demos, a people. Perhaps we don't have a demos, a European demos, strong enough with a European public opinion and a European care of European politics in order to have a democratic institutional framework. That's just, what do you think about that? I want to know your view.
Well, firstly, I think we have to go back to, if you don't mind if I just backtrack a little bit, but I do think it's a bit of a personification of a kind of beast that you're talking about, and I don't think it's is clearly a very large project, right, involving very complex differences geographically, culturally, linguistically, etc. And I do take this example that I was giving of the scientific grants. I do think this is an example of subsidiarity, in that institutions like our institution can benefit from this big sort of massive, huge organization. And I do think that it's difficult to reform a huge organization which is sort of being built up from this emerging idea. Now, the problem with the referendum is a problem within the UK Conservative Party, is my opinion. And David Cameron made a gamble with Scottish independence and got away with it. And he made a gamble with Brexit and he didn't get away with it. And the gamble was basically this. He needed support. There's a strong Eurosceptic tradition within the Conservative Party. UKIP were taking up some of their support. And if he put this referendum in, it was a convenient way of solving the problem. This is my analysis of the situation. I think many other people would agree. Now, the problem we now have is that the people did the unthinkable, and we know that David Cameron believed that the Scottish independence was too close, and this time he really got caught out. And populism is one thing that we haven't talked about, and I greatly respect your observations about democracy, but I don't think this was a vote on democracy. I mean, you might interpret it like this. I think this was a vote of resentment and discontent among the disenfranchised and unempowered people. And I think the clear answer to that, and one thing that I believe in, as well as democracy, is education. And quite clearly, this was an issue that people did not know what they were voting for, what they were voting about, and they do not understand how the EU works, and they do not understand how another alternative. So I mean, I think those are the problems. As for the reform of the EU, I think that might be for a different evening.
Okay.
Because I didn't, yes. Okay.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, we have gone out of time, but it was really. Okay, thank you very much to our both guests. I think it was really, really interesting. Also, the way so thoughtful and the manners of the debate. I think it was really, really edifying, this debate in terms of thought and thoughtfulness and arguments. So, thank you very much. And well, please join me in giving an applause to our two guests. And thank you very much for coming too.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah. Great job. Thanks so much. Great job. It was fun. Yeah, it was fun. Yeah, I don't know whether they understood anything, but yeah.
It was great. Thanks very much.
No, I mean,
I think it is very good.
yeah, it's fun.